Hi, I'm Tim Paige from timthepage.com, and you're listening to the What the Speak podcast.
What the Speak, episode 29. I got a dog in this fight, but this dog won't bite.
Do you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch? If not, these expert discussions and insider tips can help you right now, today. Welcome to the What the Speak podcast. I'm your host, Brian Kelly.
If you've never seen the story behind how and why the What the Speak podcast got started, visit whatthespeak.com/speakbetter to watch the 90-second video. If you like what you see, send the link to someone you know. Tim Paige, are you ready to answer the question, what the speak?
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. So, Tim, you're a podcaster behind shows like The Awesome Podcast and Awesome Clarity. Plus, you co-host a show with John Lee Dumas called Love Your Leap. Now, prior to all of this, you were an active speaker at conventions and training seminars. But let's hear it directly from you. Briefly tell us about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So at this point, I'm a podcaster and a podcast producer. I host a couple of shows. I have one called Awesome Clarity, which is about discovering what you want to do with your life. And the other one is called Love Your Leap. It's with John Lee Dumas, like you mentioned. And we talk about the difficult parts, the mental part of entrepreneurship. So those are kind of my really fun, passion projects that I do. I produce podcasts, and I'm a voiceover artist, which has become a really big part of my recent business endeavors.
Awesome. So I want to dig into this unique experience that you've got, not only as a podcaster, but prior to that, giving presentations in the corporate environment. Now, at that time, what were the topics or topic that you specifically focused on when you would get up in front of an audience and speak?
So it was a lot of different topics, but mostly I was talking about, I was a corporate recruiter for a really large, believe it or not, a really large door-to-door vacuum sales company. So I would speak to big groups of, whether it be, sometimes they would be new hires trying to come into the company. Sometimes it would be other office owners that were trying to learn how to do a better job with recruiting people. But those were kind of my main focuses at the time. Prior to that, I worked for a really large telecom company, and I would give training seminars for teams of telesales reps.
Yep.
So I would teach them how to do things, as well as talk to some of the higher end executives on what they could do to improve their bottom line.
Okay. Well, let's dive in a little bit more into your origin story with public speaking. So how did this start? Like, what's the beginning point for you as somebody who's gotten up in front of an audience to speak, to share your passion, to share your knowledge or expertise? Where did it all begin?
Well, for me, I've always been in sales ever since I was young. So when I was fresh out of high school into college, I got into sales doing a network marketing company, an MLM company. So I started recruiting people into this company, and I was really good at it. They found that I had a penchant for selling things. So I started to actually become the person running the events, and I would be speaking to all these people, and people would always say, man, you have so much passion. You get up there and you're flailing your arms around and you're pointing to everything on the screen and you're running around the room. You should run my event. You should run my event. And more, I would be speaking at these events trying to recruit people. And as that started to come to an end, I started to realize that I wasn't really into the multi-level marketing thing. I didn't like the idea of having to try to recruit all of my friends and everybody I met at the grocery store. So I had an interview with a large corporate. There's not a lot of big corporations here in Syracuse, New York, where I'm located. So I had an interview with them, and things went really well. And I started from the ground level. So I was the guy on the phones. I was taking phone calls and selling people on new service and that kind of thing. And people started to come to me asking me for advice on how they could do better. And slowly I was teaching people, and people were starting to recommend me. And I ended up getting promoted to the highest position that was available at the time, which was a corporate trainer. And from there, that was actually my first foray into real high-level speaking, because the multi-level marketing speaking is all hype. But in the corporate world, it was so much more about actually providing value and giving a presentation that people aren't going to zone out in.
Right.
So I kind of tied in the high level hype that I had with kind of the corporate world, and I started to build a pretty big name for myself because I was so much different from the guys who were getting up there going, well, we see that our quarter numbers last quarter were very low, so people started they stayed awake and they paid attention to what I was talking about. And then from there, so I moved from that into doing the sales training and teaching recruiters from the vacuum sales company, because things went really bad for the telecom industry a few years back. And so I ended up, I jumped ship and got into the vacuum sales company. Again, started at the ground floor, worked my way up to the top, and found out that the biggest success that I was having was helping to teach people how to run their own offices so that they could be successful. And again, it was the high energy, the high level stuff that they weren't used to. So I've really kind of carved out a niche for myself in the high energy field of whatever work that I'm doing.
So it sounds like, you've got this natural passion to be able to convey these things. And I'm wondering, did you do any type of, was there a course that you took? Was there a book that you read? Did you work with any type of coach? Or was it just completely something that evolved naturally as you progressed through your career?
It was all natural. I'm just a naturally really passionate guy. So if I jump into something, I jump in with both feet. And so if I'm going to convey a message, I find out what it is, what the core, the premise of the message, why I'm trying to deliver this message. And I get so into it, so behind it, that I just have to give that message so that everybody jumps on board.
Got it. Okay. Well, Tim, I want to talk about this a little bit later in our discussion, but just wanted to check in with you on this. I had heard that you have a background in music and performance.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So we'll circle back to this question on how that type of experience has helped you with getting up in front of an audience.
Yeah, great. That'll be a great question for sure.
Okay. Now, the one thing I did want to ask before we move on is, what's like one particular area that you feel like you've struggled with when getting up in front of an audience? It seems like you probably don't have much trouble doing that. Like a lot of folks have a fear of getting up in front of an audience. But is there something particular with your delivery or how, you convey those ideas that you personally feel like you've struggled with?
Yeah, mine is a mindset thing. So I always have this idea. I before I'm going to get up on stage, I usually will try to imagine who's going to be watching the show and who's going to be paying attention and what I can do to help them get the message, help get the message across to them more clearly. And the problem I have with my mindset is sometimes I'll try to imagine the person and I try to think of what's going through their head. Usually that helps, but every once in a while, I imagine what's going through their head and I go, oh, they're probably thinking, oh, who's this guy? Who's this guy standing up there in a suit and a big red beard? Like what does he really have to offer me in terms of value? A lot of times I was speaking to corporate executives that have been in the industry for 35 years. And here I was probably 24, 25 years old when I was doing this. So I always imagine people were thinking, oh, this young guy doesn't have anything to value. I'm going to tune out. I'm going to go down and, play on my laptop. And so that was my biggest thing. Eventually what I learned was that if I shut that part of my brain off and I would just focus on what they were thinking about my message and what I was actually getting across rather than what they were thinking about me personally, I was able to be so much more confident and get up there and deliver that message, and they would have to listen to me.
Well, it's such a great piece of advice that I know I've had some other guests on the show describe that same thing, like getting into the mind of your audience and really trying to understand, like, what are they struggling with? What are they there to hear from you? Like, what can you give them that will allow them to go out and make a change?
Exactly.
But when you do that exercise, one of the dangers is, just like you described, is that you start psyching yourself out thinking, oh, they're probably going to think, who the heck is this person?
Yeah.
And what gives them, any type of idea that they have an authority to teach me something?
Yeah, and it applies to anybody, no matter how long you've been in a business or how old or how young you are. It's so easy to go, sometimes you start thinking like, who am I? I think about these people and think about what might be going through their mind. And then I think, well, really, maybe they have a point. Like, who am I to be up here trying to teach these people how to do stuff? But you have to remember, you're there for a reason. You're speaking for a reason because you are an expert on whatever topic it is that you're speaking on. So if you're the expert and you're up there, then just remember that and deliver your message with that confidence.
Absolutely. Great. I love it. Thanks for sharing that.
No problem.
So now I want to ask some questions related to your particular area of expertise. And let's revisit this question that I had for you about your background in music. I know that you've traveled the country with a band, and you've had some very cool things happen within the music business industry. How has that, being a musician, being on stage and performing, helped you when you get up in front of an audience now to speak, or in previous parts of your career where you've had to do that? Is there any insights that you can share on those experiences?
Well, yeah. So there's 4 parts of being in a band that I think are the most the ones that really define you, whether or not you're going to be able to make it work. And so the 4 times when you're in the band. So one is your very first time performing in front of anybody, playing music in front of anybody. And I think most people as speakers can relate to that. The first time you get on stage, you're like, So, and it's the same thing with the band. I think it's all about being on stage. So there's that. There's the first time you ever record, because again, you're hearing every individual tiny intricacy, and it's probably the same way in speaking. The first time I was ever auditorily recorded speaking, I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to hear every breath, every spit, every,
Yep.
And every time I say, which is something that I've worked so hard on, it's still constantly a thing that you have to work on.
We all struggle with that.
Tell me about it. The other thing is the first time being on video. Our first time being on real video, not just recorded by like our moms, was we performed on TRL on MTV.
Yeah.
In front of well over 1 million people watching. And so that was terrifying. And then the last one was your biggest show, your biggest performance. And our biggest performance, we performed in front of about 8,000 people at Bamboozle Festival, which is a huge music festival. So those 4 times, I think, really defined my ability, because once I made it through all those 4 times, and I said, you know what, I did pretty well. I was crapping myself before I got up there, but I got up there. I did my thing, and by the time it was done, I felt amazing. So I think if you're able to use that ability, and people can apply this to whatever previous experience that they had, but use your ability to get through difficult situations to tie that into speaking. And, again, it's really, I do believe it's all about confidence. So if you can get up on the stage most of the time, once you've gotten a few minutes in, it's like you forget about the fact that you were nervous. You forget about what people were thinking, and you just go out and deliver your message. And
Yep.
It's the same way with a band. Once you're up there, once you strum that first note, you're like, I'm in, I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a similar background in performance and being on stage, which has personally helped me become the type of speaker that I am today. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily have that particular opportunity or experience to do that. But I think the things that you shared exactly about getting up there and realizing that, this is not going to be perfect, but
Right.
I have a passion for this, and I have a passion for, whatever the message is or whatever the content is that I'm going to be sharing with this audience of people. And that will alone help you kind of get through that situation where you're feeling really anxious.
Exactly.
And then it just comes, the more you do it and the level of frequency that you're asked to come and speak to an audience again just helps. And it just takes time to really take root where you can feel like, you know what? I got this. No problem.
It's difficult to perform over 600 shows as a musician and then not be confident in talking on stage.
Yep.
Although it's very different because people are focused just on you and you have an entirely different goal. But I do think in speaking, no matter what you're speaking on, there is an entertainment factor there. You are trying to entertain people. Even, I was in corporate speaking, but a lot of my talks were highly laced with humor, even though I'm not that funny of a guy. Find a way to get the entertainment in there. So, but again, it's definitely different. goal of what you're doing when you're doing public speaking is so much different from when you're playing, but the skills still translate. So that's why when people ask me, why were you able to do such a great job in terms of transferring your abilities from music to speaking, was that the key? And I always tell them, I don't think it was the key. I think it helped prepare me, but any kind of background experience, as long as it involves other people, can help prepare you for speaking.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's not just like, oh, well, I never had an experience performing on stage, so I'm probably not going to be a good public speaker. It's like,
Right.
No, I had an experience with X, Y, or Z, and there's lessons that can be pulled from that apply to me getting up here and sharing my message. So
Right, exactly.
great. Okay, now the other thing related to your expertise is I wanted to see, Tim, are there any lessons that you've learned from podcasting that apply to public speaking?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. I think I'll narrow it down to two that I think have been really valuable. One is the actual, with public speaking, your voice is an amazing tool. And you can convey an emotion or a message with your voice in so many different ways, right? And what I had to work really hard on was finding the way to actually get my voice to sound like what my brain was thinking.
Yeah.
So if I wanted people to get really excited, at first I was so nervous that I was going to come out and get all excited and squeak or something along those lines, and people would laugh and not get excited. So my voice would kind of go, well, are you guys, are you excited to do this today? And that was really, it doesn't get the message. They'd be like, yeah, we're excited. Now I get up there and say, today we're going to learn about some awesome stuff. We're going to change your life. Anybody want to get your life changed? And they get excited, like, yeah, let's get, that kind of thing. So podcasting helped me develop my voice, and because you don't see me doing this on my podcast, right? You don't see me moving my hands around. You don't see my face jumping around. All you get is my voice. So if I'm not getting that emotion across in my voice, you're not going to connect with the message. Now, I can have great content. I could have awesome content, the best stuff in the world that's going to help you do whatever it is that you want to do. But if I deliver it like this, and today we're going to change your life 100%, most people will either tune it out or fall asleep.
Yep.
And now I will say there are some amazing podcasts that have people that speak like that do really well. But for the most part, I think unless you really, really have refined what you're doing, it's difficult to make that work. So I've learned how to develop a voice that makes sense for my message, and that also parlayed into my voiceover work. Now I can very easily get whatever somebody wants, for their whatever, whether it's a narration or whatever. And so you can use that skill for speaking. The other thing that podcasting has taught me is another great avenue for marketing your speaking. I mean, and this well, obviously you're a speaker, you've got a podcast. And, so podcasting reaches such a broad audience. Yep. I mean, I used to have the statistics for how many new people subscribe to podcasts every day on iTunes. I don't have it right in front of me, but it is an unbelievable number of people that are signing up and subscribing to new podcasts and checking that stuff out. And people that have never, ever heard of you before and would have no other way to hear of you other than if they magically appeared at one of your speaking gigs, which we all know that doesn't typically happen too often. But they're searching for your message. They're searching for something that relates to your brand. So when they find you in iTunes and they go, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and they see, oh, he's speaking or she's speaking here in my local area, they go to your gigs. Or on the even better side, if you've got somebody who could potentially be a client, like I was in corporate speaking, my clients were other people that, were going, I have a big wallet that's got a lot of this in it, and I want to pay somebody to come and deliver a message. Well, it was great because they'd hear my podcast, they'd hear that I had a powerful message and a great speaking voice, and they would grab onto it and reach out and hire me.
Tim, I love this. It's like, I think we should write a book called Public Speaking Lessons Learned from Podcasting.
I think a lot of people would probably buy that book. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, cool. Well, good. I'm glad to have gotten your perspective on that. And for everybody in the audience, Tim does some amazing voiceover work. We'll be sure to link up to his website in the show notes over at whattospeak.com so you can hear the powerful voice that Tim has when he delivers.
Thanks a lot, Brian. I appreciate it.
All right. So Tim, in our final portion of our discussion, we've got the rapid fire Q&A. So there's 5 or 6 questions that we'll just run through really quickly. The first thing that comes to your mind, and we'll keep it short and sweet. Cool?
All right. I'll try not to pass out.
All right. So the first one is, when you were giving presentations, were you a slide guy or no slides?
Slide guy, 100% of the way. I love that visual.
And these are slides that you would do yourself, or would you work with like the corporate marketing team to come up with those?
We use the corporate branding, but I changed them completely because they had no idea what was going to deliver an effective presentation. So we changed it so there were videos, there were a ton of images, there were slides that were hilarious. So we focused really on delivering a great experience.
Excellent. No bullet points, right? Or bullet lists, right?
Very, very few bullet lists. We had 1 or 2 in there, but for the most part, it was a lot of imagery because, again, the people are looking for people. Some people connect more visually and people don't connect to bullet points.
Yep. Great. Now, who is one speaker that inspires you and why?
I have so many, but I'll just give one now that I bet a lot of people in the audience can relate to. Pat Flynn, who has worked so hard on developing his speaking. And the reason why he inspires me so much is because he does not do a traditional speech ever. His presentations start off by him doing something crazy almost every time. Mm-hmm. And you can't ignore it. No matter if you've ever heard of him or not, you can't ignore it. First thing he does is comes out and hands out options for candy to everybody in the audience. Or he comes out and plays his trumpet for the audience. I mean, whatever you need to do to grab their attention, we all know that that's the most important time, is right in the beginning. If you don't grab their attention, they're going to their iPhones.
Yep.
So that he's really, that's the biggest way that he's inspired me, is he's found a way to start off a story with a bang, and then he finds a way to tie it back in later on that just makes you feel like you have to watch his entire speech.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I just had Pat on here not too long ago talking about that very topic.
Yeah, Pat's he's awesome at pretty much everything that he does. It makes most people sick. So he's a great speaker, really passionate. I've been a big fan for a long time, and have been privileged to become his friend in the last year or so. So Pat's a great guy, and definitely somebody that I would recommend checking out if you haven't.
Absolutely. Okay, now, is there anything funny, unusual, crazy that's ever happened to you when giving a presentation? Some type of story?
I'm gonna say that it was funny, but it's only funny in hindsight. I had a presentation where we would have people that were, this was in the recruiting aspect of the vacuum sales company. We would have people that would come to every presentation that were successful people so they could tell their success stories. And the door-to-door vacuum sales business is it's innately a very young business. Most of the people are 18 to 22 years old, and then they move on to something else. But we had this one person, for whatever reason, she was 67 years old, and she had retired, and she was just looking for a second career, and she'd always been in sales. So we had her because I felt like that'd be a really cool story. She retired and moved in, and she was making a lot of money doing vacuum sales. So we brought her and the other person up on stage, and they were really close friends. So the one guy was a 21-year-old guy, and obviously, she was in her 60s. So they were messing around and they were joking around with each other, and they were trying to demonstrate what happens when they're out on sales calls sometimes. Mm-hmm. And she started to walk really quickly, and he didn't realize that she was walking quickly because she walked behind him, and he stepped back as hard as he could trying to demonstrate something and knocked this poor woman over. She fell stiff as a board back and hit her head. She broke her neck in the middle of my presentation. And we had about 45 people in the room that were really just digging it up to that point. We obviously had to stop. And it was like, she was just on the ground making the weirdest noises that I've ever heard. Obviously, I've never seen anybody break their neck before. So that was a pretty wild one. Yeah. People in the business have remembered that for years.
Well, yeah, I've learned to kind of revise this question a bit because I started off asking people, what's the funniest thing that's happened to you? And they always are like, well, it's funny now looking back on it, but it wasn't funny when it happened.
No, it definitely wasn't funny when it happened. We talked about it a lot after it. She still laughed about it. She came back, believe it or not, but she still laughed about it a lot. And I think the people in the room kind of, they got a great memory out of that speech. I think that was my most memorable speech.
It's easy to see why.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I want to know from you, what's the impact been, or how big of an impact has speaking had on your career? I think we can kind of glean it from the discussion that we've had, but we'd love to hear it directly from you. What's the impact been on your career?
I'm going to say confidence. Really, I've always been a confident guy, but to various degrees. But I found that after I started doing a lot of speaking, and I started getting people who would come up to me and say, you know, that really impacted me. I'm going to make this change in my business, or I'm going to make this change in my career, or I am going to come and do vacuum sales. I found that I got really confident in my ability to move people. And so because of that, it's gotten me into the career field that I'm in now. Obviously podcast production and voiceover work. You need to be confident to do that. You need to be confident that you can move people in a direction of whatever it is that your message is. And I think without public speaking, I don't know if I would have ever gotten into podcasting. I don't know if I would have ever done voiceover because my confidence was at a totally different level then. Yeah. So I would say, doing public speaking can help you develop confidence. If you're listening to this now and public speaking is going to be a part of your career and, something that you think you're going to have to be doing, I would say, and you're worried, I would say just do it. Go out and do it. Make it happen. Develop your craft as you go, but don't wait, because waiting is what I think holds a lot of people back from ever achieving greatness.
Yep. All right. One last question for you. What's one piece of advice that you wish you would have received back in those early days when you first started getting up in front of an audience?
Be yourself. Because what people try to do is they try to emulate who they really like. I could try to emulate Pat Flynn, but I'm not Pat Flynn, right? I'm Tim Paige. I'm my own personality. I bring my own degree of insanity to my speeches. So I would say if you can always remember that you're unique, you're there for a reason. People are there to see you for a reason. You were hired for a reason because of who you are. Then if you remember that, you're going to always deliver a far better speech than you would have if you were trying to be who you thought your clients wanted you to be.
Yep. I love it. Well, that's a great way to end. Tim, we'll have all the links to your website, your social media profiles, and any other resources in the show notes over at whattospeak.com. I want to truly thank you for your time, for sharing your expertise and insight into your personal story as somebody who kicks ass when they speak, present, or pitches.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. I really appreciate it, and it's been fun.
Awesome. Are you working out right now or listening to this episode while driving? If so, I know you're not able to leave a rating and review in iTunes at the moment. However, next time you're in front of your computer or smartphone, could you be sure to do so? Just go to whattospeak.com/audio or whattospeak.com/video. Thanks so much for your support.
All right. Here we go with the outro.
Thanks so much for joining us today on What to Speak. Be sure to visit whattospeak.com for show notes on every episode and to sign up for our email list to stay updated on resources that'll help you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch.